In 1848, the poison panic moved from Clavering, which is way over the other side of Essex, to here, Wicks in the Tendring Hundred. We're not that far from Harwich here, and Colchester's just up that way. Now, Mary May lived in the village with her husband and her children. Her half-brother, William Constable, or Spratty Watts as he was also known, was her lodger. Mary was friends with the village schoolmistress, who suggested to Mary that she could enter her brother in a burial club in Harwich, just as she had done herself. Now, in those days, even if you struggled to put food on the table, it was still important to Victorians that you gave your relatives a decent send-off. And you can see, just looking around this graveyard, at the stones that people would erect in their families' memories. Mary thought the burial club was a great idea because if someone died, she'd get £10, which to a labourer was actually quite a lot of money. She signed up her brother, and within a month he was dead. He died, rather horribly, in a house somewhere in Wicks, which was subsequently pulled down. The burial club wouldn't give Mary the money, so she went to the vicar, Reverend George Wilkins, who was the incumbent of this church. George was a bit suspicious of this, and he went to the policeman. The policeman himself was suspicious as well, and an inquest was opened. Her brother, William Watts, who was buried somewhere in this churchyard, was exhumed, and his innards were sent to Professor Taylor, who was the toxicological expert in London. The inquest was initially opened at the Wagon Pub, which is still open in the village to this day. But so many people wanted to come when the inquest was resumed that they had to open it in the village school, which is rather ironic, given that Mary had entered her brother into the burial club at the suggestion of the schoolmistress. Her brother being in the burial club was considered enough motive, and Mary was sent to Chelmsford. She wasn't there for very long. The assizes were in the July, and the inquest had been in the June. At the trial, Mary was defended by Charles Chadwick Jones, who had defended Sarah Chesham the year before. Now, of course, he'd got an acquittal for Sarah, so Mary probably felt quite confident that she was going to be okay. Unfortunately not. There just seemed to be too much evidence, well, at least circumstantial evidence. She'd entered her brother in a burial club, so there's your motive. And after he died, and there were rumours that he was going to be exhumed, she panicked and she started to tell lots of fibs. She asked her neighbours to say, if anyone asked, that her brother was suicidal. In other words, he'd taken the arsenic himself. Or also she asked another person to say that her brother had found a bottle in a field somewhere around here and that he'd drunk it, and obviously that's where the arsenic had been, and that's what had killed him. Nobody was convinced. Sergeant Jones did what he could, but Mary was found guilty, and in August she was executed at Chelmsford. A scaffold was built on the gate, and thousands of people witnessed her being executed. Now, sadly for Mary, thousands of other people had been disgusted by the verdict and had signed a petition begging that she be given mercy and that she wouldn't be executed, but the petition was basically torn up and chucked out. Well, it wasn't torn up because it still exists in the National Archives, but they just threw it away and disregarded it. And so poor old Mary died. Unfortunately for the May family, there were more sad times to come. Mary, on the last visit of her husband, had threatened to haunt him if he remarried. And when he came to marrying again, the schoolmistress, who had suggested she put her brother in the burial club, he took his own life. The schoolmistress was actually pregnant at the time, and her little boy was baptised in this church. But he only lived a couple of months, and somewhere in this church lie his remains. But to return to the poison panic, because Mary May had various friends, one of whom was called Hannah Southgate, who people were rather suspicious of, the poison panic changed focus. From Wicks, the suspicion fell on Hannah, who by this point was living just down the road in Tendring.